welcome to Room 109 News.
I'm Maggie, and this is Megan.
If you've been outside recently, you might have noticed there's a bit of a war going on.
That's right, and I bet you all at home are wondering exactly what's going on.
Well, you know, Mags, I've been wondering the same thing, so what is going on?
Well, our good and loyal king, King Louis XVI, really needs some money.
What? He's the king. Why does he need money?
Well, we just got done majorly helping out the Americans fighting for the American Revolution, and that took away all of our money. So, our country of France are getting very close to bankruptcy.
Oh, I get it now. That's why the taxes were up recently. Did you hear what was going on with the bread prices recently, though?
I know, yesterday it cost like half my paycheck to get just one loaf of bread. I can't imagine what the families are just how the families are sharing just one loaf. I've also heard we have commoners are the only people being taxed right now.
That's just crazy. No wonder there's a war going on. I mean, why would they tax people who have the less amount of money? I might just go out there and fight with them. Actually, no, I wouldn't. I don't really know how to shoot a gun. But we should fight for equal pay and less taxes.
Me too. We hope you do too. We'll do our part and stay in the safe building and keep everyone updated on what is happening with the French Revolution.
Now, for our first event, we will head off to the tennis courts with JC Davis and Marley Wietfeld.
From Versailles, France. Here at the tennis courts of the Salé du Parme. Look at all these people here. There's someone. Hi. All right. Look, a commoner. Hi, ma'am. What's your name?
Oh, irrelevant right now.
Alrighty. Can you tell me a little about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a commoner. I am a mother of 2 children. I just have a common job, and I'm here with the third estate, and we are taking an oath against the king.
Why are you guys doing that?
Because the king sucks. France is in debt. Yeah, and I'm mad. I'm really mad about it. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
So what are you guys gonna do about this?
Well, you see, we're making a constitution that everyone should be free, but everyone has to pay taxes. Because right now, the commoners, us, the third estate, we have to pay the taxes. The nobles, the clergies, they don't have to. And the commoners, we make up like 90% of France, and we can't afford to be heavily taxed. Taxes should be on everyone. I have children. I cannot feed my children because I have these taxes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And we're here at this tennis court because the king has kicked us out of our spot. At the palace, he kicked us out. And so we are here, and we are taking an oath until the king hears us and listens to this constitution that we're going to make soon. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Oh, yeah.
For 1789, King Louis XVI has abolished the whole entire feudal system, and France is now free.
Thank you, JC and Molly, and now we're down to Savannah and Keegan with the storm of Bastille.
Storming of the Bastille. July 14, 1789, the state prison on the east side of Paris, the Bastille, was attacked by an angry and aggressive mob. The Paris mob, joined by some of the king's soldiers, had 3,000 rifles and a few cannons. The fortress was weakly guarded with 30 Swiss guards and 85 invalids. Marquis de Launay tried to surrender, but the mob wouldn't accept it, and he was killed, and there was not any guards left. Prisoners were released later that day. 2 were put in because they were convicted forgers, and 1 was put in by his own father. The prisoners were arrested by a secret warrant issued by the king. They were not given a trial, not informed by charges, just held in secret. Once they were released, they could not say anything they saw or experienced inside the prison.
The Bastille is a prison which held political prisoners. The prisoners were treated well. The Bastille symbolized the king's power and royal tyranny. It became a symbol of the dictatorial rule because state prisoners were held without trial and it stored ammunition. The main reason for the attack, gunpowder, 30,000 pounds were stored at the Bastille, ammunition, and arms.
Thanks, Savannah and Keegan. Now we're off with Sam, Michaela, and Chloe with the Declaration of Rights of Man and Olympe de Gouges.
Here is Louis Antoine Léon de Saint-Just. Hello, I am Louis Antoine Léon de Saint-Just, a part of the National Constituent Assembly here in France. I'm just one of the many members within this group of people here.
What is the National Constituent Assembly responsible for doing?
We're responsible for writing and drafting the Declaration of Rights of Man for all of the good people of France.
Could you please give us a quick rundown of the document?
Absolutely. Essentially, we wanted to give more rights to the people by giving them life or liberty, property, security, and the resistance to oppression, and the rights to freedom of speech and of the press were guaranteed. We wanted to help the people have more say within the government and the leaders to have less power. The Declaration had an immense effect on the liberal thought in the 19th century, and we're extremely glad that it was ratified on August 26, 1789.
That's all we have for you. Thanks.
No problem.
Tell us a little about yourself.
My original name is Maria Goez. I married into the name Maria Aubry. I was born on May 7, 1748, in Montauban, France. I died on November 4, 1793, in Paris, France. I was a social reformist and a writer. I was married at the age of 16, but my husband died shortly after. I then moved to Paris and vowed to never marry again, then changed my name to Olympe de Gouges.
How did you play an important role in history?
I took up a lot of issues involving the role of women in society and advocated for their rights. I wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Women and their Rights.
Why were you arrested, convicted, and executed?
I was arrested for speaking out against the government.
Thanks, Sam, Michaela, and Chloe. Now we are down to Hannah with the royal family taken prisoners.
In Paris, France, many people were shocked to hear that King Louis XVI, Queen Marie Antoinette, and their family were all imprisoned at the Tour du Temple, an ancient fortress in Paris, where they were held as prisoners. The royal family was kept here after attempting to escape in secrecy from their new palace of Tuileries in Paris. The Palace of Tuileries became their new home after being transferred from the famous Palace of Versailles to keep them safe from an angry mob that attacked them earlier that month before they fled. The royal family feared for their lives, so they attempted to flee France to seek safety from the upcoming war. Their goal was to make it to Austria to meet Marie's brother, who was Holy Roman Emperor at the time, and who supposedly was waiting with troops to protect them. There were many exchanges of carriages and changing of horses on the outskirts of Paris, but they only managed to make it as far as the small town of Varennes before they were recognized by a local man and taken back to Paris under heavy guard. This event was later called the Flight of Varennes. This attempt to escape failed as issues began to build up and started postponing the initial schedule created by the king himself. They were forced to return to Paris, where they were all later imprisoned.
Hannah, now we're off to Colton Van Ruckel with the fears and problems of new Constitution.
Thanks, Colton. And now we're down to Ashlyn with fashion.
Hello, I'm here to talk about fashion during the French Revolution. Let's talk about the men and women's fashion. Men generally wore different variations of the habit à la Française, which consisted of a coat, a waistcoat, and breeches. The waistcoat was the most decorative piece, usually with lavish embroidery or patterned fabrics. Lace jabots were worn by being tied around their neck. Breeches usually stopped at the knees with white stockings underneath the heeled shoes with large square buckles. Coats were worn close to the body and weren't as skirt-like as the Baroque era. The coats were worn more open-like to display the fancy waistcoats. Tricorn hats were also very popular during the French Revolution. They were often edged with braid and had ostrich feathers. Wigs were usually worn by men and were usually white. Here's a picture of what men usually wore. As you can see, these are their white stockings, and these are their heel-toed shoes that they wore. Now, women. Women wore wide hoops that were worn under their skirts. They wore extremely wide ones for formal occasions, and waists were tightly bound with corsets, which provided waist contrast to the skirts they wore. They had plunging necklines that were also very common. Their skirts usually opened in the front to display an underskirt or petticoat. Pagoladora sleeves arose about halfway through the 18th century. These were tight from shoulder to elbow and ended with flared lace and ribbons. Here's a picture of what the women wore. As you can see, these are their
These are their skirts underneath, and you can see that they are more bustled up at the top, and this is their corset. Lastly, women also wore dresses in the French Revolution. The waha gown had a loose back and then became part of the full skirt and tight bodice. The robe a la France was also a common dress worn. It had a tight bodice with a low-cut neckline. It usually had large ribbon bows down the front, wide hoops, which were in the skirts, and a lavishly trimmed lace and ribbon. Marie Antoinette introduced the chemise a la Reese. It was a white dress with a colorful sash on it. It caused a lot of controversy because it didn't have a corset. Most of the time, women wore heels that were small with elegant decorations on them. Here's a picture of the dress that Antoinette created. As you can see, these are the sashes that are colored, and this is the white dress. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashlyn. And now we're off to Kennedy and Marlin with John Paul Marat.
Good afternoon, Jean Marat.
Good afternoon, sir.
I have a few questions to ask you. Do you have a moment that we could talk?
Yes, of course.
To start off, what do you do for a living?
Well, currently I am a journalist. While the French Revolution is taking place, I feel that it is necessary that I express my feelings through writing.
And what is it that you really write about?
I write about my feelings. I want to express how I feel about the French Revolution. People consider my writing style to have much rage and anger.
Why do they consider your writings to be rageous and contain anger?
Through my writing, I make it known that I want people's heads cut off. I don't personally take time out of my day to kill people, but I want it done. And it is either my way or the highway. I will get what I want. I ordered 500 to 600 heads to be cut off for preventative measurements against arcadists. I want this done because they are plotting to destroy the revolution.
Oh wow, you really do have strong feelings on what you write about. And what was life like for you growing up?
I always faced much rejection, both academically and occupationally, due to my poor personal hygiene. I didn't have much growing up, and I fortunately didn't have hygiene products really available.
And where did you attend school, Jean, and what did you go for?
I went to the University of St. Andrews. I went to get my medical degree.
And why did you choose to be a journalist instead of a doctor or a different position in the medical field? What made you choose journalism?
I felt that being a journalist, I could express my feelings more about the French Revolution. I have very strong feelings against others and events that have occurred through being a journalist. So I thought that my feelings would go better with my writing and personally would not have to say them.
And that wraps up most of my questions for you today, and thanks for your cooperation, Jean.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
Thanks, Kennedy and Marlin. And now we're down to Maximilian Robespierre.
With David.
Maximilien Robespierre was a radical Jacobite who called for political change. He was against the death penalty and slavery. At the age of 30, he became the Estates General of the French legislature. He became popular with the people for his attacks on the French monarchy. He gained the nickname the Incorruptible for his strict moral code. In April of 1789, he became the president of the Jacobite political faction. In December of 1792, he successfully argued for the execution of the king. On July 23, 1793, he was elected president of the Committee of Public Safety. The committee was formed to oversee the government with virtual dictatorial control. In September, he started the Reign of Terror. Intoxicated by his power, he called for more executions and purges. In 1794, much of the revolutionary government started to question his motives, since there were no more outside threats to deal with. In July 27, 1994, him and his followers were arrested and sent to prison. Max escaped and was declared an outlaw. He hid in the Hôtel de Ville, otherwise known as City Hall. He then tried to commit suicide, but failed. He was recaptured, then the next day, him and 21 of his followers were executed.
David, and now we're off to Trayton with the fate of kings, positive and negative.
Hello, my name is Trayton Brown. Today we have news about King Louis XVI being put as king by his grandfather Louis XV and bringing of Louis into throne from the financial issues that have been rising. King Louis then assembles the States General, which are 3 estates: the nobles, the clergy, and the commons, at which the commons took an opportunity to declare the National Assembly, making the French Revolution once begin. On July of 1789, violence erupted towards a prison, with the Parisians, where ammunition was supposedly stored. And then King Louis resisted the constitutional monarchists, and then in October of 1789, the king and his wife ran out of Versailles to Tuileries. In 1791, the couple moved once again because of the strong views of hatred that were coming towards them. While they were on the run once again, they were apprehended at Briennes, France, and brought back to Paris to accept what was coming to him, which was the stripping of his power, which was so-called figurehead because of the power stripped, but he was still a leader. And then the pair was later imprisoned in 1792, and later that year in September, the monarchy was abolished by the National Convention, and that National Convention was took over by the National Assembly. Then Louis had been founded of his counter-revolutionary secrets to overthrow with Austria, and other foreign nations, then put on trial for treason by the National Convention. After that, in January of 1793, Louis then was convicted and condemned to death by most of the people. On the 21st of January, he was executed by the guillotine. Soon after, his wife had been convicted of treason as well, and then later followed him in a couple months to the guillotine.
Thanks, Trayton. And now we are with the death toll and reign of the terror with Austin.
The storming at Bastille was between the French government and their 114 soldiers, with 50 artillery, impressive, against the little militia with about 600 to 1,000 people, with a total of 98 deaths? Really? Most of them were the government's. Also says that the militia took the governor, beheaded him, and carried his head on a spike. And it wasn't about the militia taking over the prison, 7 prisoners in it, but they wanted in there for the ammunition and made the prisoners join them? Oh, that's a lot of terror. And speaking of terror, the reign of terror in Français, oui oui. It lasted from September 6, 1793 to July 28, 1794, a total of 326 days. The war was between the mountain and the Georgians, whatever, same thing. The Georgians were composed of people who didn't know what to do with Louis the XVI. Oh, sorry, 16th for you English people. The king who fled, and put him up for trial as a figurehead for France. On the other hand was the Mountain, who was composed of people who wanted to execute King Louis XVI, and so that the Georgians didn't act and denounce them as liars and enemies of the revolution, leading to the Reign of Terror. The French Revolutionary War had a total of 40,000 agents. Ooh. Also, my favorite fact is about 17,000 were by guillotine. So yeah, France. Good thing they finally got their act together. I guess you can say they got ahead of themselves. Haha. Ooh. Also says here, Maximilian was also part of the mountain.
Thanks, Austin. And now we're off to the science support with Nathan Bolt and Zach DeYoung.
Hi, I'm Nathan, and this is Zach. Yo. And we are your science reporters today. Hey, and we have some interesting advancements to talk to you, so let's go.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is the guillotine. The guillotine is an effective way of execution, because it is faster and easier. All that the executioner has to do is pull on a string, which will drop the blade, and the sharp, slanted edge easily cuts through a person's neck, decapitating them. Doesn't that just sound interesting?
Large-scale ironworks are also an up-and-coming technology used to keep up with the supply and demand for the war effort going on in France. It's allowing them to mass-produce guns, cannonry, and any other kinds of weapons out of metal you might need.
Keeping with that idea, we have machine boring. Machine boring is a precise way of drilling holes through metal, so that way you have smoother barrels for things like cannons and guns, and it increases the accuracy of the weapon as well as just increasing the lifespan and just overall performance of the weapon.
Steam power is an exciting new up-and-coming technology, providing us with reliable, easy-to-use energy that can be accessed at any time. With steam engines being built, well, the possibilities to use this science are almost endless.
The last thing that we're going to talk about, that's probably the most important scientific advancement that aided the French Revolution, believe it or not, is the potato. Yes, the potato. Why the potato was so important, though, was because the armies could only fight during certain seasons in the year, while the farming was actually any good. Potatoes could be grown or stored pretty much any time of the year, which gave them food for any other season, like winter, when they couldn't fight, really. And it gave them enough food to feed the armies.
So there you go. There are your major technological and scientific advancements going on in your world. I'm Nathan, and this is Zach. Yo!
Nathan and Zach,
Signing
and now we're
off.
down to the economic report / tax system with Drew.
The first estate was the clergy, who were people including priests who ran both Catholic Church and some aspects of the country. In addition of keeping registered births, deaths, and marriages, the clergy also had the power to levy a 10% tax known as the tithe. The first estate was also considered the highest on the social ladder, possessed an enormous amount of power, made up 5% of the population, owned 10% of the land in France, and they were not required to pay any taxes. The second estate consisted of the nobility of France, including members of the royal family, except for the king. Members of the second estate did not have to pay any taxes, and they were allowed special privileges such as wearing a sword, and they were allowed to go hunting. Like the clergy, they also collected taxes from the third estate. They made up 1.5% of the population. The richest of the nobility had to help jobs in the government, army, courts. They weren't required to pay taxes, although the second estate was considered to be the nobility. There were some that were poor, many had some wealth, and very few were filthy rich. Both the first and second estate did not want anything to change in France unless there was a change that could help them gain more political power. The third estate was made up of everyone else, the peasant farmers to the bourgeois, the wealthy business class, while the second estate was only 1% of the total population of France. The third estate was 96% and had none of the rights and privileges of the other two estates. 98% of the population. The third estate had 98% of the population. Top of that population was bankers, merchants, lawyers, doctors, journalists, professors. Middle were just peasants. They were 90% of the class. City workers, they were overworked and underpaid, objected to most of the living conditions in politics in France. It became known as the sans-culottes because of the way they dressed and their support of the French Revolution. They were required to pay taxes. Historians believe that one of the reasons the French Revolution came about was the dissatisfaction of the members of the Third Estate who wanted more equal distribution of wealth and power.
Thanks, Drew. And now we're off to the War of Austria with Kent Beyer.
War with Austria. The War with Austria started because of Enlightenment ideas. The French people wanted sovereignty and inalienable rights. The French people were also very tired of heavy taxes and an oppressive government. The French people were encouraged to revolt because of the recent American Revolution. Revolutionists and the French monarchy both wanted war with Austria. The revolutionists believed that the war would unify the government and the people behind a single cause, as they seen in the American Revolutionary War. They were also hoping that the war would spread new ideas throughout the world. The French monarchy wanted war with Austria also. They believed the new government would be easily defeated by the foreign powers of Austria and Prussia, meaning they could go back to their old governing ways. The French declared war on Austria on April 20, 1792. This started the War of the First Coalition. Austrian forces marched and defeated French forces at first. Austria aligned with Prussia and was led under the direction of Charles William Ferdinand. Later, French forces turned the tide and drove forces back at the Battle of Valmy. Austrian army was later defeated and ended with the Treaty of Luneville, signed on February 9, 1801. The Austrian army was forced to surrender and sign the treaty, which changed border lines. The French control extended to the left bank of the Rhine River. The treaty also marked the end of the Second Coalition. At this time, France was now the leading superpower in Europe and was still at war at Great Britain.
Thanks, Kent. And now we're with the church officials / sold land with Jessica and Jonathan.
This is Jessica Vogel, and here with me is a church official from the Catholic Church of France. And I just have a few questions for you today. How do you and the church feel about the French Revolution?
Well, I really don't like it, mainly due to all the changes in cutting religion out of daily life. I mean, the French government tried to ban us through dechristianization and make us swear an oath over the Pope in 1790. If we didn't do it, they would either arrest us or deport us, and that doesn't inspire good relations for either ends of the party.
How so?
Well, for one, the whole Enlightenment thing is changing the way that people think, and it's trying to prove reason over religion. It seems as though the church is losing its potency and power over the people and the state. I mean, we even had to give up our tithe.
And what do you have to say about land ownership in the church?
Well, it is true that the church is the largest landowner in France, and yes, as well, we don't pay taxes on the land. But you see, the land belongs to the church, so we're only taking what we already have.
What about taxes on the people?
The church has an annual 10% tax on all agriculture products.
Do you believe that the church is still necessary, what with all the advancements in the sciences?
I do believe that that people do need religion, because religion is what humanizes us and teaches us ethics and morals.
What do you know about the Cult of Reason?
Alright, so the Cult of Reason is an organization, and it's attempted to de-Christianize France. Of course, being a church official, I'm adamantly against it. However, there are people that believe that a non-Christian government for France is a better choice.
And what of the Cult of the Supreme Being?
Well, it's an organization that was a form of deism, and it was established in France by Maximilien Robespierre during the French Revolution. The cult advocates deism as a personified goddess. Also inspired by the principles of the revolution, it intended to become a state religion of the new French Republic and response against Catholicism and its rival of the Cult of Reason.
So earlier, you mentioned de-Christianization. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Of course. De-Christianization was the French government's attempt to rid France of religion. Some priests were forced to marry, and those who practiced were placed under arrest and deported. We see in 1793, public worship was banned and church bells were pulled down, street names were renamed to remove the word saint from it, and some religious art was destroyed, as well as churches were turned into warehouses and even stables. They attempted to eliminate Sunday from the calendar by creating a revolutionary calendar. This calendar had 10 days in a week, and the months were named after seasons.
So what happened?
Well, in the meantime, cults rose up, the two most notable being the Cult of Reason and the Cult of the Supreme Being that I mentioned earlier. The Catholic Church was still in France, it just moved to more private spheres. Instead of dying out, it was revitalized. It may have lost power politically, but it gained power over the people. With a growing rebellion, the National Convention of 1795 realized they couldn't keep a policy of dechristianization. A formal separation of church and state was announced, and priests were released from jail, and the war on church ended, but the church had ultimately changed.
Wow, thank you. You've certainly given me some insight as to what's going on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica and Jonathan. Now we're off to government with Kenny.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Delaposen, and due to bad weather, the price of food has risen, and the Third Embassy has been locked out of the meeting of the States General, and have decided to start a revolution against the monarchy of Louis XVI. With the mass of peoples, I do believe the monarchy will fall. The revolution has finally ended, and Napoleon has taken power. Though we are still a monarchy, we are now more free. We have also started to improve the rickety financial system. Well, King was just had his head chopped off.
Thanks, Kenny. Now we're down to how it ends with Allie and Dee.
Well, that was a lot of explaining and a lot of people, and it seemed like it was a bit too much. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. There were very many people and events associated with the French Revolution.
Yeah, and I feel like our viewers are a little confused by everything that just went down, and I feel like they could learn a lot from us if we gave them a quick summary of it.
Yeah, go ahead and start it out.
Alright, well, many historical events do not have a clear ending, and the French Revolution is a prime example of that.
Yeah, the new constitution and government were filled with issues like financial stability, corruption, and inefficiency. Because of this, there are very few other dates and reasons for the end of the revolution.
Yep, I would agree with that. In 1799, the protest and military coup put Napoleon Bonaparte, Jean-Jacques Régis de Combarceres, and Charles-François Lebrun in charge of councils, replacing the previous government system.
For hundreds of years, the French were divided into three social classes: the clergy, the nobles, and the commoners. Above all was the king, but his hierarchy was being questioned by a lot of people in the Enlightenment.
Ideas began to spread to the public, so in the 1780s, the French king tried to raise taxes on the commoners because the country's debt. Riots began because Frenchmen were putting up with the king.
In 1789, they adopted the Declaration of Rights of Man, which states, "Men are born and remain free and equal in rights."
I thought that was good. Good part of it. We needed that. The French Revolution was a bloodbath that led to internal and external wars. In 1799, the revolution ended when Napoleon seized control of the French legislature, and eventually he declared himself emperor.
Napoleon was made consul for life in 1802, and by 1804 he was named emperor. During his time, he made reforms that really improved how the government ran.
I would agree with that also. His official introduction as consul is often cited as one of the major reasons for the French Revolution ending, as it marked the beginning of the Napoleon era of French history. Due to Napoleon's large role in ending the French Revolution, some historians include the wars he fought in the timeline of this revolution.
However, by the end of Napoleon's rule, the country was again a monarchy, returning the government to the same it had prior to the revolution.
I feel like that was a pretty good summary.
Yeah.
And that's how everything ended, and that is how the French Revolution went down.
Hope you guys have a good night.
Thank you for joining our cast.
Thanks, Allie and Dee, and now we're off to the weather with Rachel Knight.
Today, I'm going to be focusing on two major cities of the French Revolution, Paris and Versailles. Here, there are 6 key places where major action took place. The first, in Paris, is the Place de la Bastille, where, on July 14th of 1789, a group of insurgents attacked the Bastille fortress, which held 7 prisoners and acted as a symbol of the French monarchy. The insurgents' aim was to steal ammunition and weapons so they would be well prepared for their future attack on the palace. The combat left the fortress fallen and overtaken by the mob. Next, we have the Conciergerie, where, during the Revolution, served as a prison to 2,600 prisoners, including Marie Antoinette. Today, it stands as a museum with a list of people who died of guillotine. Also, the cell of Marie Antoinette is well preserved and serves as a room of prayer. Next, we have Tuilier's Place. Tuilier's Place kept the royal family under surveillance in 1789, where they stayed for 3 years. In August of 1792, they took refuge in the Legislative Assembly after a raid of the palace. Lastly, for Paris, we have the Palais de la Concorde. The Palais de la Concorde was originally named Palace of Louis XV, which was a gift from Egypt. Later, it was renamed Palais de la Révolution during the French Revolution. Here, the guillotine stood for thousands to see during the Reign of Terror. Next, we have Versailles and the Palace of Versailles. At the start of the Revolution, Louis XIV and his family were forced back to the capital, so they stayed at the Palace of Versailles. It then became a symbol of the absolute monarchy system of France. Also, after the Revolution, Versailles fell into despair and most of the furniture was sold. Lastly, we have the Basilica of Saint Denis in Saint Denis, France. This place served as the burial place of French kings and members of their court. On January 18th of 1815, the bodies of Marie Antoinette and Louis XIV were exhumed and given Christian burial inside of the basilica. Today, the hearts of Louis XVII, the son of Marie Antoinette, and Louis XVI are still preserved.
And, well, I'm just glad that's over. How about
Yeah, me too.
I'm really glad that there's no longer any feudalism going on, and everyone is being treated equally.
Yeah, and we are now all unified and is making the country of France grow in power.
Thanks for sticking with Room 109 News as we let you know everything that has happened in the French Revolution. Bye! Don't show these little intro things, that'd be bad.
Thanks, Sam, Michaela, and Chloe.
We're still pausing for you, Sarah.
1 second.
5 seconds.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, stop. Okay, none of these should be videotaped. We are terrible. I'm a very good anchor. Obviously, she's terrible. Commercial break. I'm sure you're laughing at this video very much, but don't. I can't wink. Can you wink? You're not doing very good. You know what I can do? A backflip. Just kidding, that's a lie.
I can flip off the high board. Anyway.
Not really. Action. No.
Oh. It's still
going. It's putting your password already.
Chocolate?
And now we're off the commercial. Hy-Vee chocolate.
I really hope some of these are bloopers.
I don't. Okay. Hello?
Breaking news.
Oh no, it's actually just my boss. Tell me I'm fired. Apparently I'm really bad.
Hey, now we're down to how it ends with Allie and D. Angelo.